The morning sun cast long shadows across the Quantico training facility as Sergeant Mills watched the new batch of candidates file onto the range. At 47, most of them looked like they could be his sons, lean, eager faces filled with the kind of confidence that comes from never having been truly tested. Among them, one figure stood apart. Frank Daniels moved with deliberate precision, his graying temples catching the early light as he methodically checked his equipment. The younger recruits exchanged glances, barely suppressing smirks. "Range is hot," Mills called out, his voice cutting through the Virginia morning air. The crack of rifles filled the space as candidates engaged their targets at 300 yards. Standard qualification shooting, nothing fancy, just fundamentals. Frank settled into his position with the fluid motion of someone who'd done this countless times before. His breathing steadied. His finger found the trigger. The first shot rang out, followed by 8 more in rapid succession. When the targets were pulled, it showed a tight grouping that could be covered by a silver dollar. The recruit next to him, a cocky 22-year-old named Peterson, glanced over with barely concealed amusement. "Not bad for an old-timer," he muttered to his buddy, loud enough for Frank to hear. The dismissive comments continued throughout the morning exercises. During tactical movement drills, the younger candidates would surge ahead, leaving Frank to maintain his steady, methodical pace. "Grandpa's holding us back," someone whispered during a brief water break. Captain Reynolds, the unit commander, made notes on his clipboard with the practiced indifference of someone who'd seen dozens of these selections. Frank's age was written in the margins, a number that seemed to carry more weight than his performance scores. When assignments were posted for the afternoon's advanced combat scenarios, Frank found himself relegated to communications duty while the high-speed candidates drew the direct action roles. Before we continue this incredible story, tell us in the comments where you're watching from. Don't forget to follow our channel and hit that like button for more stories that show what real warriors are made of. But those who paid attention, really paid attention, noticed something the others missed. Frank's equipment was arranged with military precision, each piece positioned exactly where muscle memory would find it in darkness or chaos. His rifle bore the subtle scratches and wear marks of serious use, not the pristine finish of a weekend warrior's showpiece. When he moved, there was no wasted motion, no unnecessary sound. His eyes constantly scanned, cataloging exits, cover positions, potential threats with the automatic awareness of someone who'd learned that survival depended on such habits. During the communications exercise, while others fumbled with radio protocols, Frank's transmissions were crisp, professional, using brevity codes that suggested familiarity with real operational environments. The afternoon brought urban warfare simulations in the facility's mock town. Frank was assigned to Overwatch, a support role that kept him out of the glamorous room-clearing operations the younger candidates coveted. From his position on the second floor of the administrative building, he had a clear view of the entire training area. Peterson's team was first through the breach, moving with aggressive confidence into the simulated enemy stronghold. They were fast, motivated, textbook perfect in their execution. Frank watched through his scope, making subtle adjustments to his position that went unnoticed by the observing instructors. His breathing slowed. His finger rested alongside the trigger guard. And when the exercise began, something became clear to anyone watching closely enough. Frank wasn't just occupying a support position. He was conducting a masterclass in precision and tactical awareness that would make the day's events very interesting indeed. The simulated gunfire echoed through the concrete corridors as Peterson's team advanced deeper into the mock facility. Frank adjusted his scope, tracking multiple moving targets through the windows of the training structure. What happened next would be talked about in hushed tones long after the exercise ended. 3 enemy role players emerged from concealed positions, flanking Peterson's overconfident squad. The younger operators, focused on the frontal assault, missed the threat entirely. Frank's rifle spoke once, a single, suppressed shot that marked the first hostile, then twice more in rapid succession. Each simulated kill was precise, surgical, ending threats before Peterson's team even knew they existed. Captain Reynolds lowered his binoculars, his expression shifting from casual observation to focused attention. The range safety officer beside him made a note on his clipboard, but Reynolds was already reaching for his radio. "Control, this is actual. "Who's running Overwatch on Building 2? The response crackled back. "Daniels, sir," the older candidate. Reynolds studied the tactical display, showing Frank's position. From where he sat, the angle of fire to neutralize those targets required not just exceptional marksmanship, but an understanding of battlefield geometry that came from years of real-world application. This wasn't beginner's luck or academy training. This was something else entirely. Meanwhile, Peterson's team continued their assault. Unaware that their flank security had just been handled by the man they dismissed as past his prime. They breached the final room with the kind of aggressive entry that looks impressive, but leaves little room for adaptation when things go wrong. And things went wrong quickly. The scenario called for a hostage rescue, a delicate operation requiring precision over speed. Peterson's team rushed in, overwhelming the space with noise and movement. Frank watched through a scope as they fumbled with the tactical complexity, their youth and eagerness working against them. The exercise timer ticked down. Failure was imminent. Frank's voice came across the radio, calm and measured. "Overwatch to assault team. You have 2 role players in concealment behind the far wall, left side. Hostage is positioned center room, approximately 2 meters from the eastern window." His words carried the authority of absolute certainty. Peterson hesitated, torn between following the unexpected guidance and maintaining his team's aggressive momentum. "How can you possibly see that from your position?" he demanded over the comm. Frank's response was simple: experience. The word carried weight that cut through Peterson's bravado like a blade through silk. Following Frank's precise intelligence, Peterson's team adjusted their approach. They moved with newfound caution, positioning themselves according to guidance. When they made their final entry, it was textbook perfect. Hostage secured, all threats neutralized, mission accomplished. As they emerged from the structure, Peterson found himself looking up at the building where Frank had been positioned. The older man was already packing his gear with the same methodical precision he'd shown all day. But now, something was different in how the other candidates watched him. The dismissive glances had been replaced by puzzled curiosity. Sergeant Mills approached Reynolds, his voice low. "Sir, that shooting display, those weren't lucky shots." Reynolds nodded grimly, his mind already racing through possibilities he hadn't considered when reviewing Frank's application. "No, Sergeant, they definitely weren't." The sharp wail of the base alarm cut through the evening air at 2,147 hours, transforming the quiet training facility into a hive of urgent activity. Red lights bathed the corridors as the announcement crackled over the intercom. "All personnel to emergency stations. This is not a drill. Repeat, this is not a drill." Captain Reynolds burst into the briefing room where the candidates had been reviewing the day's exercises, his face grim with the weight of real crisis. Behind him, a communications specialist wheeled in a secure satellite terminal, its encrypted display showing a tactical map dotted with hostile indicators. "Listen up," Reynolds commanded, his voice cutting through the sudden tension. 40 minutes ago, armed militants breached the perimeter of forward operating base Sentinel in Syria. They've taken 12 hostages, including 2 high-value intelligence assets and a visiting congressional delegation. The situation is deteriorating rapidly. The room fell silent as the gravity hit them. This was another training scenario. American lives hung in the balance. Reynolds continued, his briefing clipped and professional. Primary response teams are already deployed on other operations. Command has authorized us to deploy an immediate quick reaction force using available personnel. His eyes swept the room, landing on each candidate with calculating assessment. Frank sat quietly in the back corner, his weathered hands folded as he absorbed every detail of the briefing. Around him, the younger candidates shifted with nervous energy, their earlier confidence replaced by the sobering reality of actual combat deployment. Peterson raised his hand, his voice betraying slight uncertainty for the first time all day. "Sir, what's our timeline?" Reynolds checked his watch grimly. "Wheels up in 90 minutes. The hostiles have demanded prisoner releases and are threatening to execute one hostage every hour starting at midnight local time. That gives us approximately 6 hours to insert, assess, and neutralize the threat." The mathematics of life and death had never been more stark. As Reynolds outlined the tactical situation, Frank's expression remained impassive, but those who knew what to look for could see the subtle changes. His posture straightened almost imperceptibly. His eyes took on the 1,000-yard focus of someone mentally preparing for combat. When Reynolds called for volunteers for the most dangerous positions, point man, breacher, designated marksman, hands shot up throughout the room. But it was Frank's quiet voice that cut through the eager responses. "Sir, I'll take Overwatch." The same role he'd been assigned during training, but this time the stakes were measured in American blood. Reynolds paused, studying the older man with new attention. The performance during the day's exercises had been noted, but real combat was different. Lives depended on split-second decisions and battlefield experience that couldn't be taught in any academy. "Daniels, this isn't training anymore. The designated marksman position requires." Frank interrupted softly, his voice carrying a weight that made the room fall silent. "Sir, I understand the requirements." Something in his tone, the absolute certainty of his words, made Reynolds reconsider. The captain's instincts, honed by years of combat leadership, were telling him there was more to this quiet candidate than anyone had realized. The decision he made next would prove more crucial than anyone in that room could imagine. The C-130 transport aircraft cut through the Syrian night sky, its engines creating a steady drone that massed attention among the 12-man team strapped into the cargo bay. Frank checked his equipment one final time. Night vision goggles, suppressed rifle, communications gear, and a collection of specialized tools that had drawn curious glances from his teammates. Peterson, now designated team leader for the ground assault, briefed the final approach over the aircraft's intercom. His voice carried the forced confidence of someone trying to convince himself as much as his team. Frank listened with the patient attention of someone who had heard similar briefings in aircraft flying over Afghanistan, Iraq, and places that didn't appear on any public maps. As they approached the drop zone, the loadmaster's voice crackled over the comm. 15 minutes to insertion. Frank stood and moved to the aircraft's small porthole, studying the terrain below through night vision equipment. The forward operating base appeared as a cluster of lights surrounded by darkness, but Frank's experienced I could read the tactical situation, like a book. The hostile positions were marked by the absence of movement in key areas. They had established field of fire that would make any conventional assault costly. Peterson joined him at the window, following Frank's gaze. "What do you see?" the younger man asked, his earlier dismissiveness replaced by genuine curiosity. Frank's finger traced the base perimeter on the window. "They've got at least 6 positions set up in a defensive triangle. See how the guard towers have gone dark? They're using them as sniper nests." He pointed to subtle shadows that Peterson had missed entirely. The smart play would be to neutralize those positions first, but they'll be watching for exactly that kind of approach. Peterson frowned, studying the same terrain Frank was analyzing. "So, what do you recommend?" The question came without the condescension that had marked their earlier interactions. Frank turned from a window, his expression serious. "I recommend you trust your training, and let me do what I do best." The insertion went smoothly, a textbook helicopter drop, that placed the team 3 kilometers from the base perimeter. As they moved through the rocky terrain, Frank's role as Overwatch became increasingly vital. His knowledge of the landscape seemed almost supernatural, guiding the team around potential ambush sites and positioning them for optimal approaches. When they reached the final observation point, Frank settled into a concealed position that provided clear sight lines to the entire base. Through his high-powered scope, he could see details that others missed. The nervous movement of guards, the strategic placement of equipment, and most importantly, the location of the hostages. His radio crackled with Reynolds' voice from the command post. "Overwatch, this is Control. We're reading elevated heat signatures in Building C. Can you confirm hostage locations?" Frank adjusted his scope, his breathing steady despite the weight of responsibility. What he saw through that lens made his blood run cold, and confirmed what his instincts had been telling him since the briefing. This wasn't just a hostage situation. It was a carefully planned trap, and the assault team was walking directly into it. The next words he spoke into his radio would determine whether 12 American servicemen came home alive, and Frank Daniels was about to prove that some capabilities can't be taught. They can only be earned through decades of surviving situations exactly like this one. Frank's voice cut through the radio static with crystalline clarity. All stations. This is Overwatch. Mission abort. Repeat mission abort. You're walking into a kill box. The words hit the assault team like a physical blow, stopping their advance cold. Peterson's voice crackled back, confusion and frustration evident. Overwatch, explain your assessment. We have visual on the target building. Frank's response was immediate and precise. Negative. What you have visual on is bait. The real hostages are in Building A, basement level. Building C is rigged with explosives and occupied by a fire team waiting for you to breach. Through his scope, Frank could see what the others couldn't. The subtle signs that marked the difference between a hostage crisis and a sophisticated ambush. The guard rotations were too precise, too professional. The defensive position showed military engineering, not the hasty setup of desperate militants. His experienced eye caught the telltale reflection of scope, lenses, and positions that would give overlapping fields of fire on the assault route. "Control, this is Overwatch," he transmitted to Reynolds. "Request immediate background check authorization. I need to confirm something before we proceed." The pause that followed stretched long enough for Frank to sight in on 3 separate sniper positions that threatened his teammates below. Reynolds' voice came back tense with urgency. "Overwatch, we don't have time for her." Frank interrupted, his tone carrying an authority that transcended rank structure. "Control, run the name Frank Daniels through JSOC archives. Cross-reference with Operation Gothic Serpent, Task Force 160, and the Bin Laden compound assault." The silence that followed was deafening. In the command post, Reynolds felt his world shift as classified databases populated with information that had been sealed for national security reasons. Frank Daniels wasn't just another middle-aged candidate seeking a second career. He was Master Sergeant Franklin J. Daniels, retired Delta Force operator with 18 years of classified operations across 3 continents. The revelation hit Peterson's team like a thunderbolt when Reynolds relayed the information. The man they dismissed as Grandpa had more confirmed kills than the rest of them combined. He'd been the designated marksman for the most sensitive operations of the past 2 decades, his service record reading like a classified history of American special operations. But there was no time for shock. The situation was deteriorating rapidly. Frank's voice guided them with the calm precision of someone who had navigated similar crises dozens of times. Assault team, new route. Move to grid 247 to 356. I'll provide overwatch and eliminate the sniper threat. On my mark, you'll have a clear approach to the actual hostage location. What happened next would be analyzed in military academies for years to come. Frank's rifle spoke 6 times in the span of 12 seconds. Each shot eliminating a hostile threat with surgical precision from distances that challenged the limits of human marksmanship. His decades of experience condensed into moments of flawless execution, clearing a path for the assault team while maintaining perfect concealment. Peterson, following Frank's directions with newfound respect and understanding, led his team to the route that had been invisible to their younger eyes, but clear as daylight to Frank's experienced perception. As they approached the real hostage location, Peterson's voice came across the radio with a humility that marked his transformation from cocky recruit to student. "Overwatch, we're in position. Thank you for keeping us alive." Frank's response was characteristically understated. "Just doing my job, son. Now let's bring our people home." The hostage rescue unfolded with textbook precision under Frank's expert guidance. His voice remained steady over the radio as he coordinated the assault team's movement, his scope tracking potential threats while providing real-time intelligence that turned a potential disaster into a flawless operation. "Assault team, you have 2 hostiles moving to intercept from your 6 o'clock. Adjusting fire." The crack of his rifle punctuated his words, and the threat evaporated before Peterson's team even knew it existed. Within 18 minutes, all 12 hostages were secured and evacuated, with 0 friendly casualties. The militants, outmaneuvered by tactics they never saw coming, surrendered or fled into the Syrian desert. Back at Quantico 3 days later, the debriefing room buzzed with a different energy entirely. The same candidates who had smirked at Frank's methodical pace now hung on his every word as he walked through the tactical breakdown of the mission. Captain Reynolds stood at the front of the room, a folder of commendations and after-action reports spread before him. what Master Sergeant Daniels demonstrated. Reynolds addressed the group, using Frank's proper rank for the first time, is that experience isn't just about age. It's about wisdom earned through decades of making life-and-death decisions under pressure. Peterson, his earlier arrogance completely absent, raised his hand respectfully. "Sir, why didn't he tell us who he was from the beginning?" Frank answered for himself, his voice carrying the quiet authority that had guided him through the crisis. "Because competence should speak for itself. Any fool can tell you about their achievements. What matters is what you do when it counts." He looked around the room at faces that now showed genuine respect instead of dismissive amusement. "You all performed well under fire. The mission succeeded because we worked as a team, not because of any individual's resume." But everyone in that room knew the truth. Frank's expertise had been the difference between success and catastrophe, between coming home alive and becoming casualty statistics. The transformation was complete and permanent. Frank was immediately offered a position as senior instructor, his decades of classified experience now officially recognized and valued. The candidates who had once called him Grandpa now sought his mentorship, understanding that they were in the presence of a living legend who had helped shape modern special operations doctrine. Sergeant Mills approached Frank after briefing, his expression sheepish. "Master Sergeant, I owe you an apology. We made assumptions based on..." Frank cut him off with a slight smile. "You made assumptions based on what you could see. That's human nature. The lesson isn't about apologies. It's about looking deeper before making judgments that could cost lives." Years later, the story of the old man who saved a hostage rescue mission would become part of Quantico folklore, told to new classes as a reminder that wisdom often comes in unexpected packages. Frank continued teaching until his final retirement, mentoring hundreds of operators who would carry his lessons into conflicts around the world. His office wall displayed a single-frame photograph, not of medals or commendations, but Peterson's assault team standing with the rescued hostages, all alive because someone had looked beyond surface impressions to recognize true capability. The inscription read simply, "Experience is the teacher of all things. Julius Caesar." Frank had proven that some lessons can only be learned through time, and some warriors improve with age like fine wine, becoming more valuable, not less, as the years pass. In a profession that often values youth and speed above all else, Master Sergeant Frank Daniels had reminded everyone that there's no substitute for the wisdom earned through decades of service in the shadows, protecting those who would never know his name.